Okay, good morning, everybody, and welcome to this week's virtual plant clinic. My name is Bill Lester. I'm with University of Florida Extension Service here in Hernando County. And with me today is my, I guess, new regular co-host, Master Gardener Bernie. We're both here to answer all of your lawn and garden questions. So for anybody watching live, please feel free to put them in the comments, and I'll do my best to answer them, and so will Bernie. And we should have Teresa on here also, and she does a fantastic job of like looking up references and putting them in the comments to help everybody get an answer to whatever is wrong in your yard. So, see, we got a few people on here. So until we have questions roll in, Bernie, how are you doing this morning?
Well, I'm doing quite well. I had things pretty warm for a while. The air conditioner was out at the house, and finally got a new one.
No.
And I've been sleeping good and enjoying it. So I'm a happier man this week. So
Yeah, when my AC goes out, it makes me unhappy, but it makes my wife so incredibly unhappy that makes me even unhappier, if that makes sense.
it does. Happy wife, happy life.
Exactly.
That is a fact.
Cold house, happy wife.
Yeah.
So yeah, I know that it's been quite hot here in Central Florida, and for wherever you may be viewing this from, apparently it's been hot all over the country, no matter where you go. And rainfall here in Central Florida has been very erratic. We'll have a couple days where we start to get regular rain, and then I go a couple days with no rain, and everything wilts once again. I got to drag the hoses out. And then if I don't quite get to it, fortunately, sometimes it rains that night to save me. So it's been a little tough for growing most things in your yard. Good morning, Corey. How are you? Have all of our regulars on here this morning. For anybody who hasn't been with us for the last couple weeks, my regular co-host, our Florida-friendly landscape coordinator, Lily Browning, has retired. And I don't know if she's in Pennsylvania yet or not, or if she's still here. She may be watching us for all I know. I don't know. She may be on here. So, but she's no longer going to be with us. We'll have her back as a guest sometimes. We'll send her the link. We'll let her come on and answer a few questions and tell us how she's doing. And she could tell us all about the plants and birds and butterflies up in Pennsylvania, I guess. And, but we will be having a new Florida-friendly landscape coordinator here eventually. They're in the process of interviewing people and making offers and getting somebody lined up to do that. So before you know it, we're going to have a new person on here helping answer all of your questions. And I need to be more diligent trying to find guests to come on here to help answer questions also. And Corey has a suggestion about who we could hire to be the Florida-friendly landscape coordinator. And Bassem has a question about how to deal with the intense heat while gardening outside. Any ideas, Bernie?
Well, the first thing, the absolute most important thing is to stay really well hydrated and don't go for long periods of time. This is the thing. If you're 20 years old, go out and work yourself to death. Who cares? But when you get to be more mature, I'll put it that way. Long times in this can actually kill you. So it makes no sense at all to spend long times. 15 minutes, you can do pretty much everything that really needs to be done. And if you can't, you can go back later. Don't go out in the 2 o'clock in the afternoon time. Try and do things in the morning. Try and do things late in the evening. If you're going to do a little hand watering and you got the hose out there, if you're a little short on hair like we are, it doesn't hurt to run the hose over the back of your head, cool things down. That works on your car. You got a radiator. Well, there are things sticking out of your shirts, radiators for people, and don't let it overheat. And just be very, very, very careful. We've had some extremely unusual heat to the point where it's very, very dangerous, and we don't want to lose anybody. We can't afford to have any of our viewers get sick and end up in the hospital or worse. So please don't spend too much time in the sun.
That's a good point. We need every regular follower that we can get. And if you're an early riser, go out there and knock some stuff out like right at sunrise. I mean, the sun is still coming up. It's not really light at 6, but just shortly after 6, it's light outside and the sun's not up yet. So go out there very early, and that last maybe 1 hour before it gets dark, if there's a nice breeze out there, and of course, if it's not raining that time of day, it can be really beautiful, really nice time of day. So 2 in the afternoon, no digging trenches or ditches or anything in the backyard. Not a good idea.
A lot of people tend to make a mistake. You have one of these showers go through, it cools off. They go out, and because the humidity is high, and the temperature comes up, it's even worse working right after a shower than it is working before the shower. So be especially careful that you don't fall prey to that trap. That if it starts to be difficult, don't push your way through it. That's silly. Life is too short to waste it doing things that don't have to be done. And boy, that getting up in the morning and going out in the garden really starts the day a lot nicer. It's amazing how if you go out and you spend a half hour in the morning doing all the things that you did through or normally would have done throughout the day, you feel a lot better about the whole day. It gives you a sense of accomplishment.
And Teresa uses a beach umbrella and moves it around with her, hat and long sleeves. She doesn't work from 11 to 4. Corey has used construction lights and done work after dark before, which is never really thought of that, but that's a possibility. A lot of lawnmowers, especially riding mowers, have headlights on them.
The interesting thing is with this little season right now, Bahia grass is wanting to go to seed, and if you're not in an HOA where you're forced to mow the grass continuously, it would make sense to let the seed head stand for a couple of weeks and do some partial reseeding for you. It'll improve the Bahia grass. If you do that every year, if you just take a 2-week period during the seed season and let it go to seed, after 3 or 4 years, your lawn starts to look beautiful in the summer. You get one of these little showers that comes through with low pH rain, and that grass just looks gorgeous. And it all comes from mowing, but mowing high and leaving that little 2-week period to get some seed. And it's cheap and it's free, actually. I mean, here's free lawn seed, and if you price that stuff, that's a pretty valuable thing.
Yeah, bags of Bahia grass seed are like $50 a bag, so it's not cheap anymore. So if you let your grass get a little high, do you have to worry about mosquitoes because of that?
Not really. But the thing about it is the everything dries so quick. If it's just nothing but lawn grass, the mosquito breeding is not going to really be a problem. But if you have any places that are holding water, then mosquitoes can be a serious problem.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't think about some of the different spots in your yard that could be holding water, and all it takes is just a couple tablespoons to be raising mosquitoes in. So your rain gutters, very important that you clean them out so that they don't have standing water in the gutter, along with the leaves and the pine needles and pine cones and everything else that you let pile up, because of standing water up in the gutters. You could be breeding mosquitoes there. Little trays that you might have underneath a potted plant, that little bit of water that sits under the tray all the time, raising mosquitoes, 5-gallon buckets, a tarp on top of a boat or a canoe or kayak. The tarp, if it leans in a little bit, it creates a little bit of a puddle and holding spot for water. You can get mosquitoes there too. So look around your yard for those things to help reduce the number of mosquitoes, and hope that your neighbors do the same. Because if your next door neighbor has, buckets and tires and stuff like that in their yard, they're going to be raising lots of mosquitoes and you're going to get them too. And you probably don't want to be stomping into your neighbor's backyard and taking care of those things. Depends on how well you get along with your neighbor. So
Yeah.
we don't recommend that. And here's a link that Teresa put up to a University of Florida publication on growing Bahia grass. Mine looks great too. When the sun and the heat and the rain set in, my Bahia looks fantastic. It grows like crazy. Hard to keep up with keeping it cut. But summer weather definitely helps with Bahia. Bahia is a lot easier to grow and maintain than St. Augustine. So, Bernie, have you had any phone calls or visitors or diagnostics for take-all root rot in St. Augustine grass recently?
Well, I had one person bring in 2 samples, and interesting enough, it not only did both samples have take-all, but one of them had brown patch, which is a kind of a leftover thing from earlier in the year. Usually, by this time of the year, you don't see brown patch anymore, but this lawn was in pretty sad shape, and it's one of those things that if you take care of it quickly, you can pretty well solve the problem. But the lawns get worse because although the plant is basically dead, the roots are gone, the leaves are still green. So when leaves finally turn brown and you realize there's a problem, there's already probably twice as much area that's going to turn brown that there's nothing you can do about. So it's important to check it and treat it. And if you know that it's a problem in your area, you probably should just go ahead and treat annually, whether it needs it or not, because it's a lot easier to prevent it than it is to cure it. So.
Yeah, I'm starting to get emails with pictures with the telltale dead spots in people's lawns from the same neighborhoods that we hear from time after time again. So I guess we're having the summertime take-all breakout. We'll have another one probably in the fall. So we get it on a regular basis.
I had one of the people 2 weeks ago that was telling me that he had treated, and he mentioned what he was treating with, and I wasn't familiar with it, so I looked it up and downloaded the label. It was an insecticide. He knew he had a problem, and he's out there spraying an insecticide thinking it's going to cure a fungus. So
yeah, that doesn't work.
No, it just wasn't going to help him at all.
Yeah, it just kills me when you see people on Facebook. They're all asking, what does everybody use for bugs that's safe and organic? Because it has, you have to have that. What bugs? What bugs do you have a problem with? There is no magical cure that takes care of all your bug problems. If you have caterpillars, you use one thing. If you have stink bugs and beetles, you use something else. There's, it just kills me that people don't bother identifying what the problem is, but they want a cure.
If something moves in the garden, they pour 7 all over it, and it's just like going out with a box of dynamite and a sledgehammer to take care of a couple of ants that were passing through. So
yeah, and I still see people complaining about lubber grasshoppers. I have lubber grasshoppers and they're killing everything in my yard. If that's true, then you have the really wrong things planted in your yard, because there's not a whole lot of plants that I've ever seen them do legitimate damage to. And you may have plants in your yard that have have problems with caterpillars or other various insects, and people just blame it all on the poor lubbers, and they flip out over it, and they're obsessed with killing all of them.
Well, a lot of times, if you don't identify the insects, you may be treating for the wrong thing. If you've got mites, mites are 8-legged, and they're not insects. So most insecticides are not miticides, and there's a handful of plants that really have mite problems. Citrus is one where you can spray an insecticide if you want, but it's not going to take care of the mite problem.
Yeah.
Arborvitae. If you've got an arborvitae, you've got some red spider mites running around. So if you're going to take care of it, if you're going to go to the effort of actually doing something, you should do the right something, and being able to identify it or getting it identified so you know what the right something is very important. And yet, people have been told so long by these commercial people and by their next door neighbor, they look over the fence and you have XYZ wrong. And the only way to diagnose what you really have is to get down and actually look at the actual problem and then try and make a determination of what the actual cure is going to be. And this distance diagnostic is very rarely accurate, and it's like the people that everything in their lawn is being eaten by the lubbers because they can see the lubber.
Yeah.
The little guy that's actually eating it, So we got aphids. We can't see an aphid.
So it doesn't exist. It
Yeah,
doesn't matter.
We're 10 feet away, but we can see the lubber. So it's the big guy that gets the blame, and it's the sneaky ones that get the food. So, that's kind of the way it is. Just about everything in the bill.
Pretty much, yeah. Corey here makes a really good point, and I've been getting phone calls, and I have to go out and look at some newly planted trees today. Corey points out that the drought we had was pretty hard on trees. I've seen a few old oaks and pines die. They were probably weak, diseased, or had their roots disturbed. And I've seen a lot of them also. Oak trees, pine trees, but every time we have a really hard winter / spring, and what usually makes it the worst if it goes from really wet to dry to really wet to dry, back and forth, it stresses out pine trees. So you're going to see more of them killed by bark beetles in the spring. And we've seen a number of oak trees that probably weren't in the best of shape to begin with, and they've died also from a variety of different things.
The roots of trees are picking up oxygen, and because of that, they're not very deep in the soil. Most trees have a lot of roots that are very, very shallow, and oak trees, especially where the roots pop up and they kind of hurt your driveway or a lot of different things. You don't like having to mow around them. The dark cherry trees, wild cherry trees, have a lot of roots that show up in the yard. If you damage those roots, that's the basic support structure of the tree. It provides the nutrients, provides the physical support of the tree, and it is sitting there trying to get some oxygen, the gases that the tree needs. So when those roots are where they're happy and you don't like them being there, people go in and they try and alter them. I've seen them actually cut sections of oak tree roots, large section out, and then 5 years later the tree's dead, and nobody seems to ever put it together. If I did it last year, it can't cause this year's problem. But so many times the things that happen to trees are things we did in the past that are now showing up.
Yeah, I got a call on Monday about oak tree roots. A gentleman, his lawn service, had chewed over a couple of them with a lawnmower, and he's wondering what to do. So it's normal for oak trees, the very, very top roots over time will pop up above the surface of the soil. Don't bury them. Don't chop them off. Don't grind them up with a lawnmower or anything else. That's totally normal and very important for the oak tree long term to stay healthy. So yeah, we got that call. I learned something new the other day. For some reason on Monday, I was just absolutely buried for the whole morning with tree questions and calls and emailing back and forth. Sycamore trees are kind of native to Florida, but not really because they're really only native to up in the Panhandle, and they tend to grow in slightly wetter areas. So if you're growing a sycamore tree in a high, dry, sandy area like Spring Hill, Florida, here in Hernando County, you could get a problem with something called sycamore decline, in which case it's just really not happy, doesn't do well in the sand, doesn't really like the dry all the time, and it'll start to have different problems. It'll start to lose some of the new growth, and then starts to get epicormic growth, like witch's brooming, like where a branch has died or fallen off. You'll get 15 little branches all trying to grow from the same point, and the tree will over time decline. It's one of those decline diseases where if you plant, kind of the right tree in the wrong place or the right plant in the wrong place, it's going to be so unhappy and so stressed and so weakened that there's like 10 different things that could come in and finish it off. It'll have problems with mites. It'll have problems with bark beetles. It'll have other insect problems. And it's probably not going to do really well and make you happy over time. So kind of like the clock is ticking on its worthwhile lifetime. So I got some pretty good pictures sent to me of that. And it was a sycamore, and it didn't look really good. Well, it had leaves on it, but a lot of the branch tips were dead, had a lot of the witch's brooming, and just did not look good overall. So even though we have a number of sycamores here, probably not the best for a really high, dry, sandhill kind of area.
I had a woman with a pineapple palm, Canary Island day palm, and it's planted in a 3-car wide driveway in an opening that's 10 by 4.
She
And
stopped by on Monday. She was
did?
on her way to pick up palm fertilizer like you recommended.
But the palm had serious potassium deficiency, but it had taken a while to get to the point it's in. And I was explaining to her that, that this palm has got roots that are extending out more than 25 feet. And here's this little tiny hole that is exposing maybe 10% of the root structure at best. So she's only got 10% of the root structure to give to the plant, and the rest of it is covered by the driveway. And she said, well, they told me that it's got nothing but a root ball. And I said, well, that's kind of true in that if you damage one of the roots on a palm tree, it goes all the way back to the trunk. It doesn't care. If it gets damaged a foot from the tip, that whole root dies and it replaces it. So when you move a palm, you can cut all the roots right underneath the trunk. It doesn't make any difference where you cut them. It's going to lose them all back to the trunk anyway. So everybody associates that little ball that's at the bottom of the palm as being part of the roots. But I said, think about this for a minute. This tree is designed to be on a beach someplace, all sandy, and withstand 150 mile an hour hurricane wind, which it does quite well. It's got to have roots extending out a tremendous distance. Oh, I never thought about that. So, and she was using this quick one-shot fertilizer, which you put nitrogen on a plant and it puts it in grow mode. And palms are one of those things that if they don't have everything they need all the time they're growing, uh, unfortunately, that leads to an immediate deficiency.
Mhm.
May take it 3 years to show up, but if you've been giving it plenty of nitrogen and it runs out of potassium at the end of a month and you fertilize every 3 months, eventually that lack of potassium is going to start causing problems. So, and magnesium's the same way. All these elements need to be there at the right quantities continuously. So, uh, unfortunately, she was using this stuff that uh, the nitrogen kicked the plant off into grow mode, and the rest of the stuff was leached with every rain into the water system and wasn't doing much for the palm. So it takes it 2 or 3 years to show those symptoms. Takes it 2 or 3 years to clear up. So you know,
Yeah, she understood that it would take time for it to recover and start to look better.
yeah, we went all over that. So she was pretty heads up. She really
Mhm.
understood what was going on once it was explained to her. Got her a copy of the best publication I've ever seen on explaining fertilizer on palm trees is called "Fertilizing Field Grown Palms" uh, and Field Grown and Landscape Palms. It's one of the publications that the university puts out. Uh, explains all the functions of. Oh, I knew that was going to happen.
Boy, that was quick.
Anyway,
That
if
was
you
really
have
quick. That's a new record, I think, for Teresa.
if you have any questions whatsoever about fertilizing the palm, that particular publication really explains it. That anybody that owns a palm should have a copy of that. That's that important.
Yeah, palms are different. Palms are special. Palms are fussy. They're really fussy with their nutrients and micronutrients. So you have to kind of know what you're doing with them.
Palms aren't trees. That's
Yeah,
the big problem. They look like trees, but they really aren't.
yeah, and those little planting areas, you don't see them too often in people's homes. Well, sometimes near the front door, kind of hedged in by sidewalks, but you'll see it at grocery store and in parking lots. And they have this little planting area, and they put an oak tree, and then over the years it becomes a big oak tree. I mean, that's just a really tough place to put a plant. That what usually happens is they get really stressed, and then it'll die from a bark beetle, an ambrosia beetle. It'll start to decline. I guess people run into them in parking lots. People drive crazy here. So hey guys, anybody has any lawn and garden questions? Any questions about water, fertilizer, anything we can help with? Can't help with questions or complaints about the weather. We all have to deal with that equally.
They've all got good weather. We don't. That's the whole thing. We're not hearing any complaints because they like it. And that's kind of why we moved to Florida. You don't have to shovel sunshine.
Yeah, yeah. And the heat doesn't really bother me. It's hot. This is Florida, guys. It's hot. It's hot in the summer. Always has been. Some years it's a little bit hotter than other years. I think sometimes it just feels hotter than maybe in the past when we were all younger and going to the beach every weekend. You know, we enjoyed it back then. So it doesn't bother me. So like I said, anybody has any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat.
What would be a good gardening thing to do at this time? Are we in the in between? You're done with the one garden season and it's too early to worry about the other one yet. So not much is happening.
Kind of. I'm preparing for the late summer slash fall slash beginning of winter planting season. And it's all kind of squished into the same time frame. So now is a good time to sit inside and draw out a diagram of your beds and figure out what you're going to grow in the fall. Because first, you're going to be able to plant warm season vegetables that like it at the very end of summer, early fall. And right after that, it'll be time to be able to put in cool season vegetables. And you have to kind of jumble it and plan it in advance. Otherwise, you don't have everything that you want growing out there when you want it. Just take some planning, and you could do that inside with pencil and pad of paper and go ahead and draw it out. Now's a good time if you need more seeds for those crops. Go ahead and look through catalogs and look online and go ahead and order them. Shouldn't be a problem this year because all the rest of the country buys all their seeds in the spring. You know, nobody else is going to be planting stuff in the fall except for us down here in Florida and Southeast. When I'm outside, I'm just clearing beds, tossing in compost, mulching it with grass clippings, and I'm determined to not let the weeds overrun me and have my backyard a huge weedy mess when it comes time to plant things late summer, early fall. So I'm pretty much on track. The only thing I really have growing that's doing well, sweet potatoes. And you don't have to do anything to them. You just let them grow. Some point in October or by late November, they'll be ready to dig up. So I don't really have to do anything to them until then. If it keeps raining, don't even have to water them. Sweet potatoes are great. Teresa has a link to all the different, this should be to all the different infographics, I believe, about different things to plant at different times of the year. Pineapple plants. We had a class last summer on pineapples, and everybody got a couple pineapple plants, and we had a few left over. You know, I have 2 pineapple plants that are doing great. You know where they came from? Grocery store pineapple tops. So when you go to the grocery store, try to fill your cart with fresh fruits and vegetables and buy pineapples on a regular basis. And when you cut that top off, let it sit on the counter for a day or two to dry a little bit. Stick it in a pot of soil, pile the soil up around the base of, you know, the cut green part, water it, and it will grow. And mine are doing beautifully. You know, one day I'm going to get a pineapple on each one. It might happen next week. It might happen in another year. Pineapples make pineapples when they want to, not when you think they should. So it's going to happen one day, but yeah, they look great. Teresa has a bunch of pineapples, not one pineapple this year yet. It could happen at any time. You can walk out there this afternoon, look at the very top, and just the teeny tiny little beginning of a pineapple is up there. When they want to, they will. Here's a tricky question. We're going to have to think about this one. Corey wants to know, what's the ratio of pounds of nitrogen fertilizer to a yard of tree chips to compost quickly? As a general rule, for compost to compost quickly, you want, what is it? 30 parts carbon to 1 part nitrogen?
I would think that a cup of high nitrogen fertilizer, 20% nitrogen fertilizer, would be good for about 25 gallons of wood chips.
Yeah, because it depends on what nitrogen fertilizer you're using. You can go to the store and buy urea. You could buy, Bernie, can you buy ammonium nitrate?
Yes, you can.
Okay.
If you
In
buy it in
small
any
quantities?
quantity, you have to have either a permit. I don't know. I think you have to have permits now to buy any big quantity, but it is available. Not necessarily in stores. I don't think stores sell it, but you can buy it online uh, as a chemical, and it's sold in uh, small quantities.
Yeah, I think ammonium nitrate is 46% nitrogen. Urea is 20 something percent, and don't hold me to that for sure. You can go to the store and buy liquid high nitrogen lawn fertilizer, and it's 20 to 40% nitrogen, and it's already in a liquid. You can mix it with water. So if you're trying, it's an easy way to apply it to a yard of tree chips that you might have in a great big pile. I do that with my compost pile. If it seems like it needs more nitrogen, I'll mix a little bit in a bucket with a bunch of water. And then when I water to wet the compost, I'm adding some nitrogen if I think that it needs it to kind of fire things up a little bit. So it's going to depend. So Corey, it depends on what percentage nitrogen fertilizer you're using. And that's a really hard one to come up with an exact number of pounds per 1 yard.
It's also going to depend on what the tree chips are because some woods decompose much quicker. That the harder woods don't decompose as fast because yeah, the, has one of the ammonia in like 50-pound bags. That would work.
Yep, because you're getting it because you want nitrogen. So it may not be appropriate to ever really like fertilize your lawn or your vegetable garden or anything else with it. But it is appropriate for firing up that compost, especially if you have access to like large amounts of leaves. You got a chip drop with the chipped trees. That's like 99% carbon, so it's going to need nitrogen mixed in. So if you want to
We're really
fire it
feeding
up
the
and get a
microbes.
composting, that's what you could do.
Yeah, you're really feeding the microbes with the nitrogen.
Yeah, I think as a general rule, and this I believe is more by volume than by weight because the weights are going to really vary. 1 part nitrogen to 30 parts carbon. Yeah, Bassem says the pineapples from the leafy top need about 3 to 4 years to fruit. They can fruit quicker, but that's probably going to happen mostly in South Florida because South Florida, the pineapple grows year round. Here, during the winter, it doesn't grow. It doesn't do much of anything. Kind of takes the winter off. Leaves town, goes on vacation, doesn't do anything over the winter. Yeah, Teresa's pineapples are 2 years old. Corey says sometimes he gets them in a year, and he has some that are 7 years old. I mean, we can give you a general guideline. As a general guideline, it's going to take about a year under the best circumstances. But pineapples do their thing when they want to, not when you want them to.
They grow best in volcanic soils. So.
Yeah, they like a good amount of compost. Like I said, all those things are very, very happy in South Florida. I've talked to people before. I know somebody who lived in Homestead, and they grew a lemon tree from seed. And they planted the seed, the lemon tree came up, and in about maybe 2 years, they had lemons on it because they lived in Homestead. Here in Hernando County, it might take 10 years before you end up with lemons on your lemon tree because this is not Homestead. But it's amazing down there how quickly things can grow. with certain crops like mangoes and lychees, you can cut branches off or cut a lot of branches off or literally cut the tree down to a tall stump and then graft a different variety onto it. Let's say the variety of mango you were growing, the market doesn't want now. And there's this new variety of mango. So I want to switch all my trees to this new variety. You don't have to dig the tree up and plant a new tree, cut it down and graft it. They do this, and within about a year or so, that graft is taken. And I've seen branches this big around. So imagine a big cut circle, and they take a little branch and stick it in the middle. And you look at this and think, oh, there's no way that's ever going to work. What are these people doing? They're crazy. Darn thing takes, and it grafts. And within a year or two, it's grown, and they're getting flowering and fruiting off of it of the new variety that they wanted. So the rules seem to be completely different down there with certain crops. But you could do that in South Florida. Can't do that here, guys. Sorry.
Well, all the citrus is grafted in this area. So for several reasons. One, to solve the nematode problem. And second, because it cuts 4 years off of the time before it starts producing. Use budding material from an older tree, and it thinks that it's an older limb that's going to grow. And it's amazing how quickly you can get things producing doing that.
Okay, going back to Corey's compost question, his wood chip pile is the size of a bus. So how many pounds of nitrogen do you have to add to a pile of wood chips the size of a bus to get it composting? Easiest thing to do is if you get either a liquid nitrogen or a granular one, either one's going to do well. The granular one is going to dissolve once water is applied. Start working some in, water it in, and monitor the temperature. Ideally, you want to get the temperature up to about 160. Too much above that, and what happens is you basically scorch your pile. It kills all the fungi and some of the bacteria that were helping to break it down. If you stick a thermometer in a pile and it's no warmer than it is outside, then things are not composting. So if it was me, I'd go out there, and it's like adding salt to my pool. My wife, when the salt gets a little bit low, throw in 3 bags. You need to get it up. You need to get up. Well, if I throw in 3 bags and I go shooting way too high, way above the amount of salt that should be in there, I can't take it back out. If I add a little bit, wait a day, see if it gets to where I want it. Oh, we're still not quite there yet. Add a bit more. You can get things just where you want them. So if it was me adding nitrogen to a pile of wood chips the size of a bus, I'd throw in some, water it in, see what it does, make the decision, do I need to add a little more? Is what I added appropriate? And kind of get it composting, not boom into overdrive overnight, but just kind of build up that composting process until it's where you want it to be, which is going to be about 160 degrees-ish. Not much more than that. If you throw in too much nitrogen, it's going to overheat, overgo. You're going to scorch all the fungi in it. And no matter what you do, it's going to compost. It's just what you're trying to do is do it in a reasonable amount of time and not in 2-year time period. Bernie, have you ever had, because I know that you live in a previous citrus grove and everything. Have you ever chipped and composted trees out there? Have you ever had a chip drop or pile of wood chips?
We only did that once, and only about half the pile really composted. It was pretty amazing. I was surprised how the bottom third really turned to wonderful compost. The top third never did anything. Apparently there was too much oxygen, too much air in the top part. If we'd probably covered it with some bigger logs and forced it to be closer to the ground,
Yeah.
we'd have gotten more action. But we used to buy pine bark mulch, and I had quite a bit of pine bark mulch stored, and it was stored for over a year. And there again, about half of that composted on its own. It was some of the best potting soil material I have ever seen. That really came out wonderful. So the top part was good to use for putting on paths and stuff.
Yeah.
But the composted pine bark, everything would grow in it. You could take a pot, fill it with it. It didn't make any difference what you put in there. It took off and went. So I love that stuff.
Yeah, I know wood chips, after they compost, can make beautiful compost. The problem is wood chips all by themselves can potentially take a couple of years to break down. Corey said that he's moved it with a tractor, and when you start, if there's a lot of green leafy material in there, that's a good start for the nitrogen component, and it'll start composting. Once it's used up that bit of nitrogen, then it kind of drops back off. That's when you may want to add your own source of nitrogen to bring the composting action back up. But Sam mixes the wood chips with composted horse manure. That's all fine. So I know that there's a program called Chip Drop where you call a service and you give them your name and address and everything, and they share it with tree companies. And one day, it may take 2 days, it may take a year, but one day, a tree service is going to pull up and say, "You wanted a chip drop, didn't you?" "Yes, I did." And they're going to dump that truck in your driveway. And now you have a whole truckload of wood chips. Hopefully you still wanted them, and hopefully you have room for it. But that stuff does compost beautifully. The problem is sometimes it takes a couple of years to do that.
About, I don't know, maybe 15 years ago, there was a company out on the east side that was taking the material from these tree trimming companies and stacking it and composting it and then selling it. And it was something environmental, some company or other. I don't remember the name of the company. And the product really got to be pretty good. They had these real long rows of the stuff, and they had been in business about 4 years, and it really became good. And about that point, they finally ran out of money, and they never got much support, and they ended up closing the whole thing down, and now it's a tractor sales out there. But
well, there's still other companies. I've noticed other companies that do the same thing popping up in certain areas in Florida. I don't know if any right around here, but like heading into Lake County and areas that are experiencing a lot of growth, a lot of land is being cleared. So there's a lot of material to be ground up and composted. There's more companies doing that and turning it into eventually compost to be sold and taken back out to help build up soils.
You know, all the nutrients that plants need are in that, obviously, because that is nothing but ground up plants. So, you know, what better product? There's nothing finer you can put down than compost. And I wish more people would do that. You know, if you're gonna plant a garden, especially in our area where it's all sand, you've got very few microbes, almost no organic material. Yeah, okay. So anyway, if you put in the compost, turn it into the soil, Unfortunately, only lasts a couple of years.
Yeah.
All the organic material that you stick in the soil here, about 2 years, it's oxidized and leaches out. But it makes a tremendous starting point for somebody that wants to garden, and it makes a big difference in how fast things grow, the size of the product that you end up getting, and it's a lot better uh, because of the microbe feeding part of it uh, that you really need in the soil than just fertilizer. So, a combination of a really good compost and a reasonable fertilizer, you can garden really well here. But if you just put a garden in the sand, like so many of these people coming down, that's what we did up north. It worked great. We stuck our tomatoes in the ground, and 3 months later we had these mammoth tomatoes, and they were great, and everybody loved them. And the tomatoes here are little and scrawny, and they don't taste good. And I hear that everybody
Yeah.
that's only been here a short period of time. So, it's a matter of education, and then eventually, people that look at shows like this uh, get educated and learn to do these things and find out that it works well in Florida. It just works different in Florida.
Exactly. That's a great way to look at it. And I know with having a vegetable garden, what you really need to focus on is building up that soil and making compost, incorporating compost, mulching with organic material is going to break down in the garden and block weeds and hold in the moisture and turn into compost. It's a never ending thing. And if you keep doing that, after a couple years, all of a sudden you have beautiful soil out there. And you add a little bit of organic or some kind of decent fertilizer to it, depending on if you need the fertilizer or not, and you can grow beautiful tomatoes here. You just have to know how and when to go about doing it, and it is very different than up north. Okay, I think we got time for one more question here, and this is a long one from Anne Marie. Anne Marie, how are you doing? She said, cleaning beds out at the moment and a little solarizing. Oh, that's what she's doing during the summer here. How long to solarize, in your opinion? Sweet potatoes are looking good. Mine are looking really good also. Hopefully, they'll produce well. Peppers are still going, but the heat's slowing things down. I lost all my spring peppers and I just planted the seeds for fall peppers. So I'm going to try them again in the fall. They didn't do that well in the spring. I didn't take good enough care of them this spring, so I lost all mine. Muscadines getting ready to come in. Muscadines up where you live are a piece of cake. I mean, they grow like weeds up there. So I agree with the compost and worm castings. My raised beds and vegetables love it. Yeah, you have to compost, and adding to the soil is not one and done. Like maybe it is up north, you get a truckload of compost or manure, and your vegetable garden in Pennsylvania is good to go for 10 years. Here, it's good to go for a year.
Yeah.
You have to keep adding stuff. Otherwise, you go out there one day and look through, and it looks like a beach again. I'm back to pure sand. Where did the black crumbly stuff go to? Well, the microbes ate it and spit it out into the air. And in real simple science terms, that's pretty much what happened. So you have to keep on it. So, Bernie, this time of year, if you're solarizing your beds, whether it's raised beds or beds in ground, how long should you solarize them? Because it's sunny and hot.
I would say solarize as long as you possibly can, up until the point where you need to start planting. And the reason is you solarize because that's basically the only thing you can do about nematodes. And one, the longer, the more depth you can get, the less nematode problems you have. Now, if you're doing raised beds, you may not even have nematode problems. If 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 you're solarizing raised beds and there are no nematode problems, it won't hurt anything, but it won't necessarily do much for you. But if you're gardening in the ground, and especially if you're in an area that was ever citrus growth, uh, you cannot over solarize. So
Yeah.
the make sure that you're using the clear plastic, not black plastic, and let it go as long as you possibly can. Uh, it kills nematodes very slowly. They end up they move farther down. Eventually, they move farther back. So solarization is not a one-shot deal. If you need it, you should do it when solarize whenever you can use the beds for solarization and don't need them for planting.
Yeah, and when it comes to solarizing for nematodes, it does just drive them away, because nematodes can move through the soil. I mean, they're small, they don't move real fast, but they move. So it drives them away. Eventually, they're going to come back, but solarizing gives you enough time with most of the nematodes gone that you can get a fall crop in and be successful. So it helps, but it doesn't make them go away forever. They're not going to move out of town. And Teresa has a link there. University of Florida has so much information on composting and how to make compost and how to use it in your vegetable garden. Just look online, look up University of Florida composting, and you'll find a whole bunch of different fact sheets that you can read through. And Bassem, you are very, very welcome. Thank you so much for tuning in and following us on a regular basis. And thank you so much for everybody who watches the recordings of this. This is really great because we can do this live from 10 till about 11 a.m. on Thursdays, almost every Thursday, not quite though. And it's recorded and saved on YouTube. It's saved on Facebook, it's saved on our Facebook group. I know a lot of people watch this afterwards because they're busy Thursdays, maybe they work. So this is a great resource for you to go in there and watch and keep up with what's happening in everybody's gardens. And you can learn from us answering other people's questions. And chances are maybe you have the same question also. So if you watch the recording, please feel free, if you have specific lawn and garden questions, just send me an email. Let me go ahead and throw my email up here again. And let me apologize in advance for being slow sometimes responding to questions that I get through the email. Oh my gosh, things pile up sometimes. And a lot of your email questions I need to kind of think about for a few minutes to try to give you a halfway well written out, well thought out response. So thank you so much for being patient with my responses to your emails. But if you have questions, keep them coming. Send pictures, lots of pictures. You can't send too many pictures. Try to make them clear pictures. That helps. Don't do like me. Make sure that you don't accidentally have your finger in front of the little lens there. So send good pictures, but send lots of pictures, and then be patient. And I'll get back with you as soon as I can. Sometimes I'll forward them to Bernie, and he helps out by answering them on Thursdays. So we do our best to get all your different various questions answered. But once again, thanks so much, everybody, for tuning in. I am going to be indisposed next Thursday. So next week, we will not have a virtual plant clinic, but we will the week after that. Yes, that's the only thing I have on my schedule for that entire day is virtual plant clinic. And I'll do my best to get some kind of guests on here also. Because you probably get tired of just listening to me. I'm sure you never get tired of listening to Bernie, but you get tired of me. So we'll find a guest to come on. So Bernie, thank you so much for helping out with these. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for letting me be here.
Okay, and everybody, we'll see you again, not next week, but 2 weeks from now, Thursday morning, 10 a.m. Be sure to tune in and have all your questions, pictures, and everything else ready. So until then, thanks, guys. Have a great week.